Dude,
Cheers.
cheers. Happy Family Day.
Happy Family Day.
Wouldn't want to be anywhere else for the morning and afternoon.
Yes.
Not that we'd be here till like midnight on a family day. That seems a little intense.
I wouldn't put it past the Scelta team though, but yeah.
Like we could, if it was like like if we were launching Portal tomorrow, we'd probably be here on Family Day. But today's just David and I in the office. So it's kind of this nice, relaxed setting where we could just like dial in.
Yeah.
So the purpose of what we're doing right now is like, we just want to start sharing a little more about the Scelta journey. What's going on behind the scenes here? What are the things that we're thinking about as a team? What are the things you're thinking about as a leader of the team?
Yeah.
And how we're navigating a lot of the changes, a lot of the hurdles, and celebrating small wins along the way.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's just experience based, right? So it's just like we've been through a lot in the last year, 2 years as a company, as a team, as a startup, and just making that transition from a startup to a real full-fledged company. I think a lot of what we're going to say today is just from lived experience.
Totally. That's a really valid point about lived experience. What do you find is like, how does that contribute to this thought of what's the difference between founders and CEOs out there who are growing year over year versus the ones who find themselves in a similar place over a long span of time?
Well, I think it has to do with, it's a lot more work than you think it's going to be. It always is. Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of people give up early on, right? Because it's sort of like, all right, this is a long road ahead and I just don't want to work this amount of time that I have been over the last 6 months. So I feel like when I made the transition of just me and one engineer to like having a team of 8, that was sort of the transition point of like, all right, now you have, 8 team members who are relying on you, like, livelihoods, people's family lives, buying their first cars, moving to their first homes, getting married. I'm thinking to myself like, all right, just that sense of responsibility, accountability, showing up every day. And I think sharing that with 8 other people has really changed my mindset. It's a lot bigger than just me, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like early founders, when you're just like yourself with one employee maybe or one co-founder, there's less at stake. So giving up is a little bit easier, right? But when you put more pressure on yourself and you've got other people's livelihoods on the line, it's just like a different sense of responsibility.
When it's just you and one other engineer, like a lot of the business falls onto your shoulders.
Yeah.
Of, if I don't do this, it's not going to get done. Now, I imagine that's still present in a lot of ways with a team of 8 now, but how do you feel that your role as CEO of a company has changed from when there was 2 people versus now 8 on the day-to-day?
It's a lot about letting go of things that you want full control over, that you keep you up at night. If these don't get done, the business doesn't move forward, the business doesn't survive, but putting the trust in other people's hands is a tough transition. But having that trust is also your greatest superpower, right? Where you can leave important tasks in the hands of other team members, knowing that they're going to get it done. And I think I'm comfortable at a point now where a lot of what I used to do day to day has been given up, and I can focus more on the company rather than the day to day, and I can spend more time boots on the ground with clients. So I think that was probably the most important decision, was just hiring great people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So first, can you recount like a specific time in 2024 where that hurdle of letting something go was really apparent? Like it was a tough thing that you made it through. Is there a specific moment you can remember?
Yeah. Well, when we were managing 40 project management softwares at once, and we used to get inquiries daily. I forgot my password. I can't clock in. This feature sucks. I used to be a part of every single touch point. So if a client had an issue, I would be the first point of contact, first line of defense, and then translate that to the engineering team. But I remember when a company came to me one day on site, they just walked up to me and said, hey, it's really nice that you guys took care of that issue so fast in our app where the guys couldn't clock in yesterday morning. And I had no idea about it. I didn't even know that issue happened. But then I went back to the office after being on site and talked to the engineering team, like, oh yeah, they reached out to us directly. And it was just a small issue with not having service in a certain area of a construction site that was in a remote place.
Yeah.
And they just took care of it. And it was like at that moment where I was like, all right, that's awesome. That's like one less thing that's on my plate that I can just trust my team to take. And that was a really good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's almost like you get addicted to that feeling. You're like, damn, I want more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like you, right? Like, I used to care a lot about, the brand, how the brand's displayed, how the company is portrayed online, but, just relinquishing that trust and knowing that, the brand vision inside and out, and, it's getting a lot of traction, and, customers now, ask for you directly, right? When it comes to branding a project, they're like, hey, can Avery take a look at this? Can he, add his touch to it? Like that, for me as a team leader, is a great feeling that like, customers, clients are asking for you directly.
Yeah.
Like,
On my end of that, yeah, totally. What that journey feels like is I stepped into a company where like, obviously I didn't found it. So it was a matter of like, I knew I was really creative and had a lot of ideas we could pursue. And what I think is one thing that happened really well was I felt that I was given the space to explore and to not hold back and to really try things. With the understanding that like there's a co-captain there who's like, I'm going to go with you. Like, I want you to choose that direction because I believe in you as a professional. Like, again, hiring the right people, like I'm trusting in that I made a choice to bring you here.
Yeah.
And that you have ideas and that I'm going to pursue them with you, but I'm also going to help guide you and keep with you in that to analyze as we're whacking those weeds and discovering things like, does this feel right? Hey, here's an idea. Try whacking this weed.
Yeah.
And I felt a great sense of empowerment rather than this sort of railroading.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is the track and you're going to follow it.
Yeah.
So that I think organically flourished, and it took time to build that too.
Yeah.
It took us honestly 6 months to actually find just a look and feel.
Yeah.
Because there's so many aspects to a brand beyond just how it looks and presents itself online. But how the look and feel of it tied into our values and how we operated as a team, it felt like it took 6 months to really get there.
But you think about it, in the grand scheme of things, 6 months is not that long a time, right? But in the startup world, that feels like an eternity because everything moves so fast.
Yeah.
I think one of the best realizations we had is like looking back a year ago at our website, looking back a year ago at our software platforms, looking back at, we're like thinking to ourselves like, man, we're so much better now. Our site's so much stronger. Our brand's so much stronger. Our apps are so much stronger. It's like you look back, and especially when you're moving so fast, you're like, wow, we've changed entire companies, the look, the feel, the functionality in the matter of a year.
Yeah.
Right.
And something I think that's worth noting is that even though now we can look back in hindsight and be like, damn, that's not what it is today.
Yeah.
In that moment, 8 months ago, we 100% fully believed in what we were doing, right?
Yeah.
And we just kept full sending it. So we didn't stop ourselves because we were trying to predict what it should be or what's the best version of this without launching it. We said, this is an idea, I'm excited about it, so we're just going to send it.
Yeah.
We just kept going with, this feels right. But then followed up by, okay, send it through. I mean, yeah, because the website's changed, just the website alone. Mind all the other aspects of Scelta. The website's changed at least 12 times.
Yeah.
But we full sent it and fully believed every time.
And that's the beautiful thing about being a part of a startup type company where you have to grow so fast is your ability to look back and say, wow, we've grown so much. You think about if you work in a job where it's, an established company, it's an enterprise company, you may spend 2 years there and you see some of your metrics go up and you're like, oh, that's great. But I feel like your rate of growth when you're in a startup environment where everything's moving so fast, you're a whole different person. You're a whole different, you have the same values as a company, but your ability, your skill set is so much sharper in such a short period of time.
Yeah. And I feel like it comes from a greater sense of ownership.
Yeah.
Every person on the team, everything that they do has large scale implications on the direction that the company's going.
Yeah.
Right? We were just having a really deep conversation over the weekend about the Scelta portal.
Yeah.
And what was the feature that we were talking about? We were talking specifically about, maybe adding a new view.
Yeah.
Because we have client view, we have the owner view, the builder view.
Yeah.
And we wanted to maybe introduce a subcontractor view.
Yeah.
And that was a deep conversation with Joel and Jess.
Yeah.
And so their feedback, it matters, because they're the pros. Jess was like, no, we can't do that. I'll introduce an idea, be like, why can't we link sign up, register here on Apple? And he's like, because of this reason, because Apple doesn't allow. I'm like, great, okay, you're the pro. I'm going to listen to you.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask, So you naturally have an ability to put the right people in the right place.
Yeah.
And then to get the best results out of those people. But it could be possible that a lot of people out there struggle to hire right or find those right people. So what's been your experience with hiring the right people, and as well as like hiring the wrong people?
Yeah.
What's that been like over the last year?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't take the traditional approach to hiring. I think hiring is a lot about the feeling you get from that person, the fit that they have. I mean, with the team, it's an energy when they come in for their first interview. Do you feel like this is someone that you're going to spend you want to work with and spend a lot of time with? Because in a company like this, the hours aren't regular, right? You're working 70-hour work weeks. So you have to spend a lot of time with that person. So I think first thing is like, do you get a good feeling from that person, right? Do they share the same values as you? Do they have the same hunger as you? Do they know what they're getting themselves into?
Yeah.
Right? Like this is this is not going to be easy, right? Does that person have that tenacity, the relentless initiative to just, Initiative is one of the big things. It's like, do I feel like this is the type of person that's always going to ask for the next direction, or the type of person that's going to come to me with, possible solutions and say, which route do you want to go? I think that problem solving mentality is huge. Credentials are, important, but I feel like they're more checking off boxes. Once those boxes are checked, that that they have the skill sets, then it goes beyond that. It's all the soft skills about that person. Yeah. Because there's a ton of strong engineers out there. And when we first put out our job posting for engineering, we got over 100 applications, all very strong applicants. But the ones that we ended up hiring were the ones that took the initiative, came here in person, put together a prototype product that on their own time and just launched it and showed it to us. And, the ones that, come in here and I could just get a feeling that they're going to be with us for a long time. It's important to me. So I feel like I have an answer to this. What's more important, showing initiative or the vibe check? The vibe check, for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in a setting like this, I've never been a part of a startup before. So from my experience, like entering to this world, I feel like it took me time to understand like the type of person I need to be a part of this. Like, because you've done a great job of establishing, this is Scelta, this is who we are, this is how we operate, and this is what we do, and we want you to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I think someone can read that on paper and be like, yeah, totally, like I can fit into that. I'm a hard worker.
Yeah.
But that sense of ownership and initiative, I think, is something that can totally be taught.
Yeah.
And that can evolve over time. And we've seen it in me, we've seen it in our engineering team. It's taken months to get people to rise to the occasion in a way. Mm-hmm. Whereas the vibe check is something that, like, if it's off, I feel like it'll always be off because one or the other has to change to make the vibe check work rather than evolve. You're just like changing. Yeah. And I don't think that yields good results if you feel like you have to change or the other person has to change to fit. Yeah. It's a lot more efficient and a lot less costly to find someone and take the time who you just vibe with right from the start.
Yeah. And like you said, if they're invested, right? Because they have to be looking at this long term. Yeah. So, if they're looking at competing job offers, if they're going to work at some of the larger tech companies, they may have higher salaries, more benefits, and there may be room to grow there. But here they have to be invested in the fact that this is a long-term play. Like, this isn't a play where I'm going to come in first few years and it's going to be, a career-defining job. But in 5 years, when this company, the rate that we're growing, they have to be invested in the long run, right? And so when they come in, a great example is one of our engineers who came in with little experience actually ended up being one of our strongest engineers because he even told us the few years I spent in school doing software engineering, I think I fast-tracked that just by working 6 months at Scelta. I think I learned, an entire undergrad worth of skills because I feel like when you put practice to you apply your training to practice and you actually get to do it with real customers and real code there's real stakes, there's money on the line, there's, companies' information. These are high stakes job opportunities, right? And I feel like those who can rise to the occasion have a lot of room to grow. So I'm a big believer in growth, right? I feel like people, when they come to the company, I know that the way they are when they first show up on day one is going to be totally different than the way they are 6 months from now. Yeah. It's been really cool to see the growth of every team member. Right?
100%.
Launching their first mobile app, right? Dealing with their first crash of a server, right? And how do you don't get that experience from school. At Scelta, we're known for our speed. We're known for our ability to iterate really fast, right? When it comes to content, we get it out same day, if not next day, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to features or, ripping out an entire architecture rebuilding, we can do it in half the time as most companies. And that's because each team member here is super dialed in, right? They know that, when it comes to work, they work as efficiently as possible because resources are limited. We understand that, we don't have a team of hundreds of engineers who can kick it down the road for 6 months and then launch the feature later on. No, we need that feature launched in 2 weeks, right? So I think that the speed at which we can iterate and the urgency that our team takes towards every task is really what sets us apart.
Yeah, you said that every team member is really dialed in. What do you mean by that?
Well, at the beginning of the day, when you walk into this office, everyone gets right to work, right? There's no kind of lollygagging or what am I doing today? Every team member really knows what they're doing. And that took a lot of work, right? At the beginning, we spent months understanding what our goals were, what our mission was. But I think that investment of time of understanding what our mission is really paid off dividends in the long run, because now me as a captain and as a founder of the company, I don't have to worry about, is so-and-so know what they're doing today or this week, right? They have a really good system. So it's a lot less micromanaging. It's a lot more people feel empowered because they know what they need to get done, right? You walk in the office, and me as someone who's watching payroll, watching expenses, I know that every dollar being spent is, generating value.
Yeah. You're kind of starting to outline a structure. It comes across that the most important thing is having a really clear vision.
Yeah.
Where we're going and how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And then next you mentioned systems. Mm-hmm. So in pursuing that vision, this is our map. This is the way we operate in order to reach it in a way that's profitable and in a way that empowers each of you as well to grow and to develop deeper connections to what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm most proud of, which is a recent event, is the Scale Up Pitch competition. So when we were doing our showcase, which is our booth, and we had the whole general public come visit and all the judges come visit, it was a very busy room, right? And we had 10, 15, 20 people at a time standing in front of our booth waiting to learn more about the company. And I remember standing there and at the beginning being a little bit overwhelmed because I'm thinking I want us to give the best possible first impression to all these people, right? But then when I took a moment to step back and look at the room and I looked around and I saw all of our team members having one-on-one or one-to-many conversations with people, and I could just see their expression on their face and the smiling and the laughing and the excitement. That was a really proud moment for me because I was like, you know what? Every one of our team members knows this company inside and out. They know our product offerings. They know the mission. They know the vision. And I had full trust in them being able to portray our company in the best possible way. So I think that attributes to the fact that when everyone comes in the office, they know what to do. I mean, even our interns who've been with us for less than a month, they were, talking to judges, right?
Yeah.
Giving judges full breakdowns of the company. Shout out Kareem. That's such a cool feeling that I had some judges come up to me after the competition and just say how cool it was that, everyone on your team had very similar responses. Yeah. And that's a really good sign, right? That we're all on the same page.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's great unity amongst our team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that helps with the speed. Everyone's got each other's back.
Yeah. But now a question for you is as we scale and as we grow, right? We do have a team that's all on the same page, right? We do have a unit that's cohesive, but we have 30 employees. Now we have 30 team members. How do you maintain that level of understanding, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. So we have systems that we work within, because we can't be. Right now, the beauty is that we're sitting right next to each other. Yeah. So we're constantly communicating about the vision. We're constantly iterating together and finding ways to maintain that sense of unity of we are still communicating together, and whatever structure that would fall within, if it's a classic, every week we're going to make sure that everyone meets together and we're all in one room together working on something, or if it's through having when we introduce new team members, having the collateral in place that very clearly articulates the vision and gets them excited about it. and people knowing their roles immediately, like this is what I'm going to do and this is how I serve this mission.
Yeah.
So they can come out of the gates really strong will be important. But that's a great question. It's and truthfully, I think I can only speculate until it happens too.
Yeah.
Because we do have our eyes set to expand the team pretty aggressively this year. And I think it's going to be something that we just, like everything in Scelta so far, we're just going to learn by doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would really credit the brand and the marketing that we have, because I feel like every person who's come in here for an interview in the last 3 months already knows really who Scelta is,
right.
What our product offerings are, who our customers are, how we handle customer interactions, how we are as a team. So I think it's really a testament to our brand and marketing ability, because everyone's present on LinkedIn, they're present on Instagram. So when they see us posting, they know like, oh, wow, that's their product. That's how it works. Those are their clients. That's how they interact with their clients. There's their team. Oh, there's Avery, there's Joel, there's David, right? They just see familiar faces. So I think when they come in for an interview, it's like they already know the brand. They know Scelta. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I honestly have nothing to add to that. It's that concept of like just knowing someone before you even meet them.
Yeah.
Because we've already had 100 conversations just digitally.
Yeah.
Where people are present.
Yeah. And then if we back it up with internal documentation, right? Like we have our, Scelta story, Scelta magazine, kind of like Scelta manifesto that we can share with team members.
Yeah.
And they read through that a few times, right?
And just being in the office together, like people get to feel the culture within the office pretty quick too.
Yeah, there's no segregation. There's no real like hierarchy or like different, there's no walls even, right? In the office, it's a very open space, right? So like you get to work with sales, you get to work with engineering, you get to work with marketing, all in the same cohesive space, and that's cool.
Yeah, that you bring up a really important fact of like none of the departments are isolated from each other.
Yeah.
Like we're constantly pushing, how does marketing and engineering work together? Like what magic happens between them that they strengthen each other? Marketing and sales is a really obvious one. Sales and engineering, like how does each department work as a whole with the other?
Yeah.
And what special interactions can you have within each department to strengthen both together and connect them?
And then eventually, like, when you do get to that large team out, you can't just have a giant open room and 30 desks, right? It's just going to get chaotic.
Yeah.
So the goal is that, eventually leaders will just naturally arise in those teams, right? And I can already see it, right? Like yourself with the branding and marketing division and, someone like Joel with the engineering is, I feel like eventually the core team members who've been with us since day one will grow into leaders of their own departments and carry that same mentality that they had when we had 8 team members versus when we have 30, 40, 50.
Yeah. And it becomes like a brand network effect.
Yeah.
Where you have really strong advocates or ambassadors of like people you can look to who really know intimately like the core values, the mission, the vision. Yeah. And they help permeate it out to these further extensions.
Yeah. I think it's like that level of transparency too, right? Like we share every win with the team, right? We get a new contract on board, like everyone knows about it, right? Everyone on our team is excited about it. We share a big calendar, big ass calendar. Yeah. So everyone knows what's coming up.
Maybe I'll insert a quick photo of it and what we got while we're doing it.
Everyone knows the big milestones that are coming up, right?
Yeah. That constant communication applies internally too. That's a great point actually, is that like people external to the brand really know the brand well from that external perspective of what we're doing each week and who we are, what we stand for, but having an equal amount of internal communication as well to constantly feed that flame and feed that understanding is equally as important. Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of our clients have gone ahead with us because they've seen so much proof, right? They've seen so much validation. So they're like, you've successfully worked with these 30, 40, 50 companies. So, I think you can successfully work with my company as well.
Yeah, that extends internally too, is like, if we're sharing wins every week, if we're going out hunting and getting wins and we share with the team every week, like how could they not be excited? Yeah. It's like being on a sports team and being like, we won the game this week. We won the game this week. We won like who wouldn't want to keep doing that? Yeah. So that constant communication, like, and it's not just wins too. It's about like, hey, dude, like, congratulations. Like, we all worked together and got this win. Yeah. But then when a hurdle presents itself too, there's still an equal amount of communication. Yeah. What's the best approach to leading the team through hurdles?
Well, one thing that I really enjoy doing is if the team worked really hard on a feature or a bug fix, and I can see that feature being utilized, I love sending, screenshots of just like, hey, that feature that you worked on for 2.5 weeks, that was a big lift and a big hurdle. Like now it's paying off, right? And here's real people using it and enjoying it. So, that validation I think is key.
Yeah.
So once, the engineers know, because if, you launch something into the abyss and you don't know if it's being used or if it's even valid, right? That's a lot harder. But I think giving the engineers that validation that, hey, what you're working so hard on is actually, providing value to this person, this real person. So I think the validation is important. I think taking a mindset of never getting angry at anyone for any issues, right? That's something like me as a leader I'm not a angry person by any means. I don't think I've ever raised my voice once in this office. Because I get it. If problems happen, then we just sit down and we solve them and we fix them, right? I make mistakes myself every day, right? And I think that approach of like, okay, it's broken, this sucks, okay, how are we gonna fix it, right? And let's, my biggest thing is like with a customer, I always remind the engineers, it's just like, keep them in the loop. If something goes wrong, don't go silent. Don't fear their response, right? Like, come at it head on, right? Something went wrong, you call them up directly and you let them know, okay, here's what's wrong, here's the action plan, here's how we're gonna fix it. Because worst thing you can do is, leave someone hanging, and then the unknown can spur off, worse feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Following up with an action plan, here's how we're gonna fix it. That's huge.
And if it's gonna take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like keep them posted every 2 days, every 3 days, right? It's my biggest thing. Like I always, the engineers are getting better at it, but just like if you're building something that's large and difficult, which is most of what we build, just like, even progress, right? Screenshots, here's where we're at today. We've gotten this far with the functionality, but it's still not working in this sense. So just, that level of transparency, I think is key.
Yeah. Well, right now, so Scelta bootstrapped for a really long time.
Yeah.
And we made like a conscious choice that we're going to bootstrap for a really long time. And now we're changing the leaf, but let's first just talk about why you felt you wanted to bootstrap for as long as possible first.
Well, the biggest reason for bootstrapping from day one was to validate the market and prove, that we have a real concept, because it's a lot harder to sell an idea with no traction than it is to sell traction. So that was my biggest goal from day one. It's like, I don't just want to, give up a large chunk of the company based off of theory. I wanted to go out and prove it, right? And build stacks of proof that way. One, you have stacks of proof. Two, you have people who believe in you. And you actually make you make deeper connections and better relationships with people, right? Once they've seen you out in the trenches for a year or 2 years, like, the people you meet along the way, they might become your best investors, So bootstrapping was important because, nowadays I feel like 2 years into the business, I feel like our valuation is, 10x what it could have been.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle. Like it's really hard, using your own savings, your own money to build this up. Versus I know a lot of companies who've gotten a couple $1 million in funding from day one, and I see a lot of them burn right through it because, you're going to make a lot of mistakes in the first few years, right? So if you can get rid of a lot of those mistakes early on before you take on money and investment and responsibility, then when you do have investment, you're far more responsible, and the hunger that drives you, right? When you have nothing and you want something, you're far hungrier than if you have a fallback or a safety net, right? I feel like sometimes early investment can act a bit like a safety net, and you can lose that edge a little bit because you're like, oh, I don't need to launch that feature in 2 weeks. We have 4, right? Or, we don't need to get new customers this week. We can kind of work on product and, we'll get customers down the road, right? Whereas us, it was like urgency from day one, right? Like we got nothing, we got to turn it into something. Yeah. So I think that you can't, discount that hunger that you have when you have nothing.
Yeah. Like cavemen sitting around a fire and just being like, if we don't put logs in this thing, we're going to die. Mm-hmm. We got to go out and get logs and no one's going to save us.
Yeah.
And that, I think that a lot of lessons were learned through that, and like it made us better
Yeah.
as a team in the long run. And I like your note about like there were a lot of lessons we had to learn along the way. I mean,
Yeah.
2024, I mean, our entire sort of like offering has shifted.
Yeah.
And the products themselves have evolved and changed. We've stopped selling certain things, sold them again,
Yeah.
changed how we sell them, changed the product, repackaged them. It's been, and now we feel like we've settled into a really strong foundation, and now we know, because we went out and tested things,
Yeah.
that it's really not going to change, and it's about making this better now.
Yeah.
And that's the perfect opportunity to then get funding.
Yeah, like it put myself in an investor's shoes. If I'm looking at a founder, like I would want someone who's gone out there into the desert, no water, no supplies, but like, came back victorious, right?
Right.
Because, that person I know, went to the earth's end to figure it out, right? Like just figure it out, right? Spend a couple years just figuring it out, with problem solving, because if we took investment 2 years ago, we'd probably have a totally different product stack, right,
Yeah.
than we do today. Versus like now we know how to spend the money. Like we probably would have spent the money irresponsibly in the first year,
Totally.
right? Versus now we spend far differently. And also just to show investors what we've been able to do with such, little resources, I think goes to show to them, like, if you actually gave us resources, look how much more we can do. And I think that's a much better story to buy into than just a theory.
Yeah, 100%. We really learned where we need to spend our money.
Yeah.
By learning where not to spend it.
Yeah.
And the direction that the company's going now. Like the vision for the company's never felt more clear now.
Yeah.
Which is the perfect time to inject fuel into the ship. Like we were building a ship, and then we changed the ship we wanted to build 5 times.
Yeah.
No one wants to pay for you to discover
Right.
what you're building before you even know how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
Now we're like, we built it, we're sailing, we want to sail way faster, and we just
Yeah.
need some help now.
Yeah. It's like, the old story of like thinking back to my sports days when I was first starting out squash. Like we didn't have the fanciest equipment or the fanciest clubs or, the nicest courts or the best coaches. We just figured it out, right? And, I look back and had some of the best training of my life when it was just, me, my brother, our training partner, Steph, and, a grummy court with broken lights and, rackets we found from the rental bin but that, bred some really strong athletes, some really, competitors, right?
You guys went far
Yeah.
that year. Yeah.
With very little resources. So, it's a classic hero's journey. Like the greater the hardship, the bigger the dragon, the greater the story, right?
Yeah.
Versus like starting in the castle and, having all the nice Valyrian steel swords.
And it's a choice to kind of put yourself in that situation too. You gave yourself stakes by
Yeah.
adding on team members. You gave yourself stakes
Yeah.
by bootstrapping the whole time. And it's been tough,
Yeah.
but totally for the better.
Well, like Sam Altman says, CEO, founder of OpenAI, he says like the number one trait we look for in founders is determination. It's like, can you, be thrown 100 problems and still be, just as excited to want to move forward.
Right.
Right. I think just that all in mentality, right? Like you put all of it on the line because you don't want to be like, half in, half out, like, oh, this might work. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. I can just go on with my daily life. It's like, no, this is everything.
It has to work.
Yeah.
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 And I think from a leadership standpoint, translating to the team, part of how we've developed that culture is because of your stance and because of your 150% investment of do or die.
Yeah.
Just you being that way and organically, that's it's contagious.
Yeah.
Right. Like we see a dude who's hustling and sending it every week. Like it's just classic leading by example. Everyone wants to be a part of that, and it's exciting.
Yeah. I wouldn't ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't do myself.
Which is why you do it all.
To go to those
You
extents,
just go-
right?
Yeah.
Just being really comfortable being uncomfortable. Right?
Yeah. That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can't discount too, there's strokes of luck, right? In the startup world, right? You might meet the perfect client, right? Because you're going to meet hundreds of people, you're going to get hundreds of no's, but finding that one person who, really believes and wants to be an early adopter. So luck plays a role, but the more you can put yourself in position to get lucky, the luckier you are, right?
Yeah, there's that classic quote of like, luck is just opportunity meets skill.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. And I think a lot of luck can be attributed to a series of events where you did go to that thing, or you did wake up early, or you did work on it at that time, so that you were in the position to be ready for that opportunity when it came.
Yeah.
If we weren't sending it 70 hours a week, if we weren't 110% dialed every week, then we might not have been ready for some of those opportunities. And then we'd be like, that's unlucky.
Yeah.
But really, it would have been because we chose not to put in those extra 10 hours and failed to seize that compound effect.
Yeah. We all put ourselves out there, right? We put ego aside and just, we'd call up clients. Do you want to be our first client? Do you want to use our product for free? Do you want to use it discounted, right? You just got to put ego aside and just throw yourself out there. Put yourself in front of, in uncomfortable situations, pitching in front of 4 or 5 clients who you have no idea who they are, right? Mm-hmm. Driving up to London and sitting in a room full of contractors and, pitching them how to use tech, right? Where most of them are probably going to hate you from first impression because they don't want to change their ways, right? Like, yeah. I've gotten a lot of FUs from contractors and people, get off my site, right? Like, you just got to smile and go to the next one,
Yeah, totally. It's like the volume game.
Yeah.
And even thinking about like the product, like you were going out and pitching products and prototypes. I mean, the first day we met, I remember your pitch and I remember like the slide deck that you presented. Can you speak a little bit to like what you can start selling at what point? Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah.
Like, when is something ready to be put out there?
Well, the question is, you're never really going to be fully ready to launch something. Like, the only way you're going to feel fully ready is if you launch something and figure out what's wrong. Yeah. Because when you work on something for so long, and you just like if you look at a speech or a paper or an email for so long, you're too tied to it. You're too close to it. The only way you're going to get true, honest feedback of how you can really improve is if you put it in front of someone who has no idea, no preconceived notions, no idea who you are. That's when you're going to get real, genuine, honest feedback. So I think the concept of, is this ready? I think my advice from experience is just launch it, even if it sucks. I mean, if you look at the first Airbnb prototype that went out, if you look at the first Facebook that was out, like, those platforms are not even close to how they look today, right? But they had somewhat functionality, some functionality. So I remember, like I said, looking back at some of our first prototypes of like clocking in, clocking out software, and some of them were janky, right? But unless we launched them and unless we got feedback, and we used to get lists upon lists of problem, and we would just like take those lists back to the office, go through them one by one, launch again, iterate again, go back and show someone, say, because people love progress. They don't expect you to show them a perfect product right off the bat. I think people are afraid of that, and they think that, this product has to be perfect because if I get any negative feedback, then I've failed. But no, like, getting negative feedback and iterating on it is a far better win than launching something that's perfect, which you're probably never going to launch.
Yeah. 100%. And I think the true thing that you need to have first is like an understanding of like a real problem.
Yeah.
Like a real pain.
Yeah.
And then, because the way you can solve it can be solved a million ways. You could build a million different iterations of something. Right. And that's where the feedback from putting it out there comes in, is like, this is what would make me excited to use it, Yeah. But like, it all has to stem from identifying like an actual problem. And how have you identified an actual problem? I mean, like, for the portal, for example, that came a little later in Scelta's time, but what was the moment that led to discovering a real problem, and what did you do to follow up with it?
Well, I think it was getting early traction and success with real time. Once companies and contractors started saying, okay, great, you've really helped me manage my internal team, my internal projects, my internal expenses, but what you really left out was my external relationships. So I have this great software and I can manage my team really well, yet I'm still managing my clients on texts and phone calls and emails, Google Drive, Excel spreadsheets. So like, I feel like we're not done yet. I feel like that's interesting about product development, is like, you may develop something that really serves a need and solves a problem. Then you may, by solving that problem, you'll find another problem. And the other problem was, the most important side of the business, which is the client who's paying you. So you may have a great internal experience, your team is dialed in, you're managing them properly, but the way that you communicate with clients is archaic. So I remember a contractor, when he was really happy with his project management software, he looked to me and said, all right, Dave, where's my app for my clients? How can I make just as good an experience as I did for my team members, but for clients now? And that's when it really clicked, is like, no one's really focused on the client, right? The one that's paying the bills, the one that's keeping the lights on, right? At the end of the day, your team members are super important, right? They're going to do the work, but the person who's paying the bill, should also have a really good experience. And they're all used to, the traditional methods of communication, and they're used to it. And so they're okay with it, but they don't know that there's a whole other world out there, a new level of opportunity. And I feel like someone's going to capitalize on it, but I want us to get there first.
Yeah. Can you track the timeline of that person told you, like, where's my app for my client, to the first time you presented something to solve that problem? How long was that? What happened in between?
Yeah. So we spent probably 6 months building that. But the problem was we were managing 40 project management softwares at the time. So I had to make a decision. Do I have the little engineering team that I had, which was only 2-3 engineers at the time, to focus on this new app, which is Portal, or do I focus on continuing to iterate real time? So that's when I had to make a big decision of like, okay, are we going to pivot here? But are other apps going to suffer? So then that was actually when I made 2 new hires. It was very expensive. And I knew that hiring 2 new engineers, they wouldn't generate any cash flow for at least 6 months, because when you're in product development, you can't sell anything, right? So I knew that those expenses were just going to go towards the bottom line every month. So that was a big decision that we made of like, okay, we're going to, all the revenue that we're making is going to go right back into product development. It's going to develop an app that we don't know for sure is going to work. So, we spent 6 months, launched the first prototype of it. Wasn't that great. Didn't really have much traction. And the problem is people were mixing the apps. They're saying, okay, now the project management app has to be the same as the client app. So then we tried combining the 2 apps, and we spent a good 2 months figuring out how we're going to combine the databases and the permission levels. But then we quickly realized that there was too much functionality inside of one app. Like now we were resorting back to our competitors, which have 30, 40, 50 features, which is, the whole reason why we didn't want to do that in the first place was because it was too complex and people didn't want to use it. So then probably a year down the road, we're like, okay, now we're going to make them 2 completely separate apps. So Portal is going to be its own app, and project management is going to be its own app. So then we did a heat map, and we charted out all the features. And we're like, okay, here's all of our features in project management. Here's all of our features of the client portal. How can we make them distinctly different, like very, very distinct, that this is the functionality for real time, this is the functionality for Portal. So that's another month of figuring that out, right? And then finally, I think we, just recently come up with
2025, we made it.
But you're, as a founder, you're thinking you're like hundreds of thousands in development time, for something that may or may not work. It's stressful. So the greatest satisfaction is to now see user feedback coming in from the portal and how much people are enjoying it and how differentiated we made it. That's the biggest win, in my opinion, so far at the company.
Yeah. There's a couple things in that story of like, it's not like we worked for 6 months in a bottle or like in a bubble.
Yeah.
I remember you hired those 2 engineers, and I think genuinely, as soon as there was an interface like that was usable to an extent, you started trying to sell it.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And I remember our first meeting with Timberland.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing to do even during product development, because throughout that 6 months, we got quite a few no's.
Yeah.
Because the product wasn't right. But we found out much faster what was wrong with what we were building, because we were trying to just get people, we were trying to get it in their hands, but really the value just came from them seeing it, using it over an hour of just talking about it and being like, is this something you'd want to use? And them saying, well, it's got this issue, or just giving honest feedback. 10 minutes of Gino's feedback changed the trajectory of the portal because we identified a really key feature of how builders communicate with their clients. And so over that 6 months and now a year, like you were constantly trying to sell it every month. Every time we were in for a 360 meeting, you're like, hey, we got this portal too, and this is how it connects. Yeah. Are you in? And then finally, the first official user, I would say, of what the app is more like now came around November. Yeah. So it was like that process of April/May to November. Mm-hmm. And now the portal is really starting to take its roots. And we had so many internal meetings too, with the team debating for like hours about what the heck this portal is and trying to discover it. It was a lot of whacking through the weeds for the portal. And I'm not sure if that's a sign of like you're onto something special, But in our case, it was.
Yeah.
It was something kind of newer that there wasn't really much out there for us to look at and follow. We really had to dial in some things on our own and learn the hard way.
Yeah. I think that plays into the greatest fear of founders, I think, is the unknown, right? Because you're doing all this work with no guarantee that it's going to pay off, right? And while we were managing real time, trying to build a whole separate platform, trying to sell, so you switch gears a lot. You go from like, all right, for this hour, I'm going to focus on real time. Then I'm going to go on a sales call and try to sell real time again. But then I'm going to jump over to product development and work on Portal. And I'm going to try to sell Portal. And then I'm going to, make sure that all expenses are covered for the month and, we have enough revenue coming in. So I think like if you can get over that, which is like not easy to do, is, your ability to pivot and jump and move, because you're going to work on 50 different things a day. Right. So, and that plays into the fact of hiring the right people that can handle it. So you don't have to think about it as much, but it's hard as a founder to not have your hand in every bit of product development, sales meetings. So
yeah, sales has been the most important thing you've done.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious to say, but like without sales, you die. So yeah, we're developing Scelta Portal for almost a year now. And that whole time, in addition to that, like you're going out and hunting like these larger 360 projects because we knew we were onto something and we need to survive long enough to reach that potential and reach that opportunity.
Yeah.
Reach that true product market fit.
Yeah.
And I think why people need funding so early on is because they're not going like all out as best as they can to do the sales.
Right.
And with what they got.
Yeah.
Because I think something I've learned just from watching how Scelta's evolved is that like people are out there who are willing to use a product that is not near perfect at all.
Yeah.
So long as like you're willing to just work with them and be quick to apply their feedback and to seriously consider how their opinion on how it could be made better.
Yeah.
And it becomes this collaborative product development process that works a lot faster than just our internal ideas.
Yeah. Well, sales are like oxygen for a company, right? And I feel like sometimes companies focus so much on product development, especially the ones who have funding, because that's really all you have to worry about is product development. But when you're bootstrapped, you got to think about product development, sales, and just team morale and just keeping everyone going. Because I think that was probably our greatest skill set, was our ability to work on product development while still making sales, right? And that balance was so difficult at times, right? Because like, hey, all right, I only got 10 hours, 12 hours today. Is it how much time am I going to spend on product development? And then how much time am I going to try to spend on sales? And how much time are you going to spend nurturing your current clients to make sure that they stay on board, right? So it's such a balancing act of doing that. And especially a company like ours, we were running 3 products, 3 different product stacks, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like we were just working on one. So
I imagine people could hear that and just be like, damn, that's a lot. And I think that's like the hard truth of it, is that it just is.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's just a lot of work, and it's like, you just gotta be, that's why like going back to team members, you gotta find people that are just willing to go deep with you, because I trust that the team's going to get it done.
For you personally, if you had to boil it down, what's the one thing that really keeps you driven and going even through the harder times to stay that dialed in?
I think how much our community loves the product. I think like that feeling of, if a company can't use our app for a day, it's like the end of the world, right? Like we've had times where some of our apps go down, server issues, whatever it might be, knock on wood, only very few times in a couple of years. But, just getting those angry phone calls of like, I can't operate unless I have your platform. So that reliance on our platforms, I think like to run my entire company is validation that what we're building is incredibly important. And just getting that, that feedback, that I love this product. I just think like the customer feedback is really what keeps me driven. Like we're doing the right thing, right? Even if we have a smaller community of people, like I think, having just over, 1,200 users, but I feel like there are 1,200 people who love the product, right? So I think knowing that our product is, essential in their day-to-day lives, keeps us going.
That comes across as your form of validation.
Yeah.
And your wins each week.
Yeah.
Yeah. To keep fueling your tank. And because It kind of, it seems to be drawing back to that idea of like, you created stakes.
Yeah.
You're fulfilling the stakes. And by fulfilling those stakes, there's this great reward, and that fuels you because you know that not only is our team relying on Scelta and to live our lives,
right,
but you know that others are relying on Scelta to run their work.
Yeah.
And that they get great gratification out of using the product.
Yeah.
And so that's what it seems like it's coming across to me as what you're describing.
Yeah.
So that when things get really tough and there's 50 things on your mind and you're up at night,
yeah,
those times I imagine suck. Like
Yeah.
I'm not the CEO, so there's things and there's struggles and there's hurdles that even the team like will never truly understand. That just falls on you as the individual's shoulders, especially of a team of this size. And
yeah,
at the time at which our company is, just a couple years in on the precipice of that greatness.
yeah,
So I can only imagine it can feel heavy on your shoulders because you're the person like leading the
Yeah.
charge. You're the apex of that spear.
yeah,
So what you're saying is that those response and that feedback from the clients of even the angry phone calls,
Yeah.
because it tells you that what you're doing has an impact.
yeah. Well, I remember getting my first really angry phone call from a client, and it really bothered me for a couple of weeks. But I had a few sessions with my mentors, and they told me that that's probably the best validation that you could have gotten. Like the fact that that person was so emotionally distraught based on your platform being down just goes to show how damn important your platform is. So I think I've lived through a lot of the pain points that we're trying to solve with Scelta. So that's one huge validation for me is like I've lived it. I've been on the construction sites. I've helped people build homes. I've been inside of showrooms. I've tried to communicate with multiple parties on a construction site. I know what it's like. So that's one. Two is like having people that rely on me, the team, right? Knowing that their livelihood is relying on Scelta succeeding, right?
Yeah.
And they put their trust in me, and they put in their trust in Scelta to fulfill that part of their lives, right? Their livelihood. And then the customers who love working with the platform and, can't operate without it. So I think like those three pillars for me is like lived experience, a team that relies on it, and customers that love it. I think those three things are driving forces.
Sweet.
And of course, my support of family and mentors and growth coaches and team members, like just that constant, you got this, Scelta's going to make it. Like that helps too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. You can't do it alone. You got to have those people who just like will hold your back when you're bracing against storms, right?
Yeah.
Be like, you got this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 100%. Cool. Well, thanks for sitting down.
Yeah.
I'd love to do this again sometime. You hear often?
Yeah. Big fun.
Every day.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because I would love to just keep picking your brain. I think it's valuable.
Yeah.
As you go on this journey to share your feedback and direct experience, lived experience of what it's like to be a CEO, bootstrap a company, build a community around a product, find product market fit. I think those are things that we can dive into more.
Yeah. I think it's the most fulfilling yet terrifying experience of one's life is doing this.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
It's going to be a hell of a story one day.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, man. Pleasure. See ya.